Welcome to today's video on interactive Slack messages. We're going to be meeting your team where they are, because when we send these Slack messages, this will enable your team to do things like route meetings, leads and accounts, or to approve things like emails, documents or duplicate merges, all without having to leave the comfort of Slack. I'm going to start things off by showing you guys a demo of what we're going to be building, because that will hopefully get you excited and get you to stay on with me for the duration of the video. So the first thing we're going to do is in Marketo in our database, I'm going to go to request campaign, and then I'm going to go to this send webhook requestable campaign I set up earlier, and this is going to send this webhook which we've configured to send to Slack. So if I go over to Slack now, once that webhook has sent, so we can see here that it's queued in Marketo. It hasn't yet quite sent, so I'll pause the video while we're waiting for that. Okay, great, that has been processed. So if we go over to Slack, we now see the new message that was sent today, and you'll see all these previous tests that I've done in order to get ready for this blog post. So I hope you appreciate all the time and effort I put into making sure that this works for you guys. And if I click review here, so we can see all the MQL information, the company size, job title, their email, and their industry. And this link here is hyperlinked to bring you back to the Marketo person record to make it easy to follow up and investigate. So we're going to go review here. This is going to bring up the modal. We're going to select a status. So I'm going to say self-service, too small for sales contract. And then I'm going to set myself as the owner, and I'm going to hit submit. So now if I click this link, it's going to bring me to the person in Marketo, and if I go to their activity log, I can see that these new values were sent to Marketo using the Marketo API, and the person was updated. So we changed their status to SSL. We made my email address. We put that in the owner email address field, and then we also have the person status reason that was filled out, which is too small for sales contract. So I hope you're excited. That's what we're going to be building here today. And I will start by saying that in order to handle those Slack interactions, we need to set up a listener server, which will involve Python code, of course, and also hosting that server. And we'll make use of the Slack API and also the Marketo API, like I already mentioned. So if you're unfamiliar with APIs and you don't know how to program with a large language model as your coding partner, I recommend checking out the Demystify the API and the Python for RevOps crash courses, because they'll give you a gentle introduction to APIs, but then also teach you how to work with an LLM as your coding partner to test, write, debug, and deploy your code. And then for anyone who's a Marketo user, you can check out the Marketo API here to learn how to use that specifically. And although I'm using Marketo as the example here, everything I go through in this video can be used with HubSpot. You can send the webhook you can send this same webhook from HubSpot or any other marketing automation platform so that the message appears in Slack. And you can then configure it on the back end so that when you fill out this modal, this can update any platform you want. It can update Salesforce, it can update HubSpot, or it can update Marketo. So although I use Marketo as an example here, you can swap in any MAPs or CRMs that you want for this Slack interactions workflow. Okay, so the first thing we're going to start with is the Slack block kit builder, because this is the drag and drop builder that will allow you to build a message with the design that you want. So if we go to, you can just Google this Slack block kit builder, and it brings you to this page where there's a nice drag and drop interface. So on the left hand side, you have all these different things that you can drag in. You can drag in buttons if you want. So if we click here, it'll add a button. Just click me down the bottom. If we want a time picker, we can insert that. So you have all these options available for configuring your message. And then on the right hand side here, we get the JSON code that we need in order to be able to send this formatted message. So you'll notice that in this payload in the webhook here, it's a bit hard to see here, but this is the exact same code. I've just copied it from Slack and then pasted it into the Marketo webhook. And you can also paste this into Python code if you want to send the Slack message from a Python script. And then the nice feature here is that if I want to send a test message, if I want to send this to my Slack instance, I can go preview in Slack. I can select a channel. So let's just go to the random channel and send. So if I go to the random channel now, I can see that that nicely formatted Slack message was sent. So this is a great way to build the design that you want for your app, and also to test out what it looks like in your own Slack instance. So this is how you can play around with it. For this blog post, we're going to use a very simple template which I've got hosted in GitHub here. So you can copy and paste this, and you can paste it straight into your Python script or Marketo, or you can paste it in here for a bit of a preview. It is a bare bones template because all I need this to do is open up the modal where I request the information, but you can obviously tailor this however you want. So this is the template we're going to be using for the blog. The next part is creating a Slack app, because you want a nicely branded app so it's easy for people to recognize that this is an automated message. So I put the Marketo logo in here because the messages are coming from Marketo, but you can put the Salesforce icon in there or the HubSpot icon in there if the messages are coming from HubSpot or Salesforce. So the first thing to do is go to slack.com/apps, create a new app, go from scratch. The app name, let's just call this live demo. The workspace, it's going to be the Workflow Pro. We're going to create the app. And then the first thing I'll point out to you guys is that if you want to make your app look a bit snazzy, I'll just put in, this is Trinity College Dublin, that was my college in Ireland. I'll just insert the logo there. I can choose a background color, so I'm here, I'll just choose white. It has to be a 6-digit hex code. So let's just go pure white. Oh, that doesn't look great. So it complains here the color's not dark enough for the app to read the name. So I'll just stick with black just for the sake of this demo. And then you can add a short description and a long description here. So this is how you make your app look nice. 6-digit hex code. There we go. So that's how you make your app look nice. And then I've got all these steps listed here so you can follow along in your own time. The next step is adding the OAuth scopes. These define the actions that our app will be able to carry out. So we're going to go to OAuth and permissions, bot token scopes, and we're going to add chat write, users profile read, and reactions write. So let's go to OAuth and permissions. I just saved this. Oh, the short description can't be empty, so I'm just going to type live demo here. Okay, and then we're going to go to OAuth and permissions. And then we're going to add bot token scopes. We're going to add chat write. We're going to add users profile. Let me just see profile read, users profile read, and then reactions write. So these are the 3 OAuth scopes that we need. We're going to install it to the workspace, approve the app install, and then this will become more important later on when we're setting up our .n file in our Python project. But just for now, we'll note that the bot token, we'll need that later on. And the same for the signing secret. I'll show you what those two look like in a second. So let's go here. So under OAuth tokens, we've just put these in. Now we're going to go install to the Workflow Pro. Going to go allow. Okay, that's great. And then this bot OAuth token is the one we'll put in our .n file later on. And then the other one that's important is when we're dealing with the modal, Slack is going to send a this Slack app is going to send a signing secret to our listener server, and we'll authenticate using that signing secret because we don't want anyone to be able to send stuff to our listener server in an attempt to corrupt it. So every time Slack sends to our listener server from this live demo app, it will send the signing secret so that we know it's coming from Slack and it's safe for us to interpret whatever Slack is sending. So we'll put both of these in our .env file later on. And now we get to the fun part of handling those Slack interactions. And before I dive into the code and show you how that works, I wanted to go through some flow diagrams first that will explain the workflow to you, and it will be easier for you to understand. So the first part of this is obviously sending the message to Slack. And you can either use this Python script here, and I'll go through this script and the rest of the code later on. You can use this Python script or a webhook from your CRM or marketing automation platform, and they'll use this template, this JSON template here to send that webhook. This will just be the body of the webhook basically. So you can use either of these two methods, the Python script or a webhook, to send the message to Slack. Then what happens when you click this review button, when you click this, Slack sends a request to the listener server, and the listener server is just this Slack interactions listener.py script. It's just running somewhere, and that's all a server is. Don't be intimidated by that word. It's just a Python script running somewhere. It sends a request to our listener server, and this then calls the build review function, which takes the information passed from Slack, which contains information about the MQL, and it uses this information about the MQL to populate the modal JSON body. So all this information that Slack sends us, it's contained within the Slack message that gets sent. We populate this into a JSON body, and then we send this JSON body, we send this package back to Slack so that Slack knows what it needs to put in the modal. So that's what appears here. So to summarize, we click the review button, Slack sends information to the build modal function via the listener server. The build modal function packages everything up together, which contains information about the MQL and the fields we need to request, and it sends this package back to Slack so that Slack knows what to render in the modal. Then the human on the other end fills out these fields, and then when the submit button is clicked, another request gets sent to the listener server, but this time it goes down a different branch in the code. It goes down the view submission branch, and it parses out the status reason, and Slack user ID of the selected sales owner. And then once we have the Slack user ID, we get their email. And then once we have their email, we make a request using the Marketo API to update the status reason, and sales owner email address within Marketo. And then as we saw earlier on, this is how all these values get updated on the person's Marketo activity log. And then the very last part of this is that once we've parsed the information from Slack and we've updated the person in Marketo, the listener server then calls a function, the add reaction function, to add a check mark to the message so that other people who might come into the channel will know that we have actioned this MQL already. So this is the flow of what happens when we're interacting with the modal. And now I'm going to walk through the code for a little bit and explain to you guys how we can test it out. So I'm going to do that in PyCharm because it's a lot nicer of an interface to go through these things. So let's open this up. Sorry, I want to zoom in here because I know it's probably not easy for you guys to see, so give me a second. Okay, that should be easier for you guys to see. So the first thing to note is that we've got our .env file here, and I won't open it there because I've actually got secrets in it. But what the .env file looks like is it's got all our Slack tokens. It's got our bot token, which we get from, where's my Slack app? Our bot token, which we copy from here. And then it's also got our signing token, which we can copy from here. So both of those go into our Slack function. The Slack webhook URL is for this send Marketo webhook payload. If we want to test sending via webhook, we have a function to replicate what it would be like sending from Marketo or HubSpot or Salesforce, just basically sending via webhook to Slack instead of using the API directly. So you'll put in your Slack webhook URL and this will map to a particular channel. I'll show you guys at the end of the video how to set that up. And then the final part of this is just your Marketo API credentials. So then we've got our Marketo functions. It's very simple. We just have one to get our access token that we need to make subsequent API requests in Marketo. And we have a function to update a lead. And it takes the lead data, and the lead data contains the lead ID and all the fields we want to update on the lead. And then we've got this send Marketo webhook payload. So as I mentioned from before, we take the Slack webhook URL, and as I mentioned, this webhook URL maps to a particular channel. So we'll take the URL for a particular channel, like in this case it would be the wins channel, and that's where we're going to send this message. Then we have all these values, these dummy values that we're going to put in the message we're going to send, and we're going to use this as a template file. So this was copied directly from the Slack block kit builder. We just copied this code in here, and it's actually, you don't need to copy it from Slack. You can just copy it straight from here as well. It'll be in your GitHub template. But I took it from the Slack block kit builder and then I put it in here. So that's where this comes from, this template. And then all this script is doing is it's replacing these variables, like the number of employees, the industry, the job title, the email address. It's replacing them with these dummy values here. And then it's just sending that payload to the Slack webhook URL. It's as simple as that. Then we have a different method to send to Slack, but this time it's going to use the Slack API. It's going to use the send message function. So it's going to use the Slack API directly. So instead of sending it to a webhook, we're going to use the Slack API. So that's the only difference between these two scripts. They both send a message to Slack, but one uses a Slack webhook URL, and then this one uses the Slack API directly. And similarly, we read in our Slack bot token, we say what channel we want to post it to, and then in this case, this template is set up more or less the exact same as this one. It's just that the formatting's a little bit different because this is a webhook payload, and then there's slight differences between these, but I won't go into them. You can see that the variable names are different. As one small difference between them. And then all this script does is it populates these dummy values that we specify up here, and it's going to replace those in the template. So wherever we see curly brackets here, these are going to get replaced. And we'll notice here that at this bottom we've got this review context value, and this is almost like a hidden value, and this is what gets sent to Slack. Sorry, this is what gets sent to the modal function here. We send this hidden information in review context to the modal value so it knows what to put in the package that we send back to Slack so that Slack can build a modal. And it will contain information about the MQL. So we can see that we're back here, send Slack message. Yeah. And there's a better example of how we populate review context later on. Oh yeah, we do here. So this is what review context contains. It contains the person's Marketo ID, their email, their first name, their last name, and their company. So this gets sent here, and that's the information that we use to populate the modal. So send Slack message. Yeah, so we populate our template with all these values. We've got review context, we've got the person's Marketo profile URL, which we populate. And then we take all these values and then we call this render function. And this render function is what takes these values and inserts them into the template. And then all we do is send that message to Slack then using the API. We pass the authentication token, the Slack channel, and then this is fallback text. So the actual message that will get sent is in this payload value here in the blocks parameter. But in case there's some issue rendering that in Slack, Slack will fall back to using this message here. Okay, and then I'll just go through the Slack functions quickly. I probably should have done this earlier, but we have this is just a helper function. So whenever we need to request information from Slack, we'll use this helper function, and we just swap the endpoint that we're requesting to. And then if it's a post function, we need to make updates to Slack. We call this helper function, and we just swap out the endpoint that we're calling to make the update. So the send message function, for example, calls this function, and then the method is the chat.postMessage. So that's the endpoint we'll use here. And then these are all the things we need to send the message: the channel, the text, and the blocks. Open modal also uses the Slack post function. We have the add reaction, which is Slack post as well. And then the get user profile. So to find the person's email address, or the Slack user's email address, we use this. And that will just put in this case, the user's profile.get. That's the endpoint that we'll use here. So those are all our Slack functions. And then last but not least, this is the listener server, which is this one here in our diagram. And these are the only changes you'll need to make to this code. So if you're also a Marketo user, you'll need to change the API names of these fields to match the API names used in your instance. So lead status is a standard field, you won't have to change that, but this is a custom field, so you'll need to create a custom field or put in another field here that you want to update. And then this is also another custom field. So these two will need to be modified by you, but then everything else is the same and will work off the bat. Or if you're using HubSpot, you'd obviously, instead of having a Marketo function down here, it's right here. So instead of updating in Marketo, you could have a different function to update in Salesforce or update in HubSpot. You just have to swap this out. Okay, then the first part of this, these values don't need to be changed. We just use those for specifying the IDs and the modals and to help us extract information from that modal. So you don't need to worry about that. And then this part is whenever we get a request from Slack, we need to verify that it's actually Slack sending us this information and that it's our Slack app sending us this information, because the signing secret is associated with the app. So we want to make sure that when we're receiving a request, it's our app that's sending it to us. So this function here just checks that the signing token that got sent matches what we have stored in our .env file, which we've copied from here. The build review modal button. So as I mentioned, this takes the review context value that got sent from Slack. So we populate, where did we do it? Here. We populate the review context with these values: the Marketo ID, email, first name, last name, company. And then these get sent in our Slack template or in our Slack message as a hidden value. And then this part here, when we call the build review modal function, it's that review context that gets sent. So back here, Slack sends that review context to build modal. Build modal takes that as a parameter, and then it forms this JSON body which it will send back to Slack, so Slack knows how to build the modal. So we just have the lead label here, which is the person's first name and last name. And then this is where we reference all these block IDs from up above. They get inserted here. So we form the modal package, and then that gets sent back to Slack. And then what other functions do we have? We've got the get sales owner email address. This is a simple one. Once we get the Slack user ID, we send that to the get user profile, and then this will return the person's profile information, and then we'll just return the person's email address. And then this is the main worker. So this is what decides whether we go to the build modal function or whether we go to the handle submission function. So first thing we do is we get the Slack signature from the incoming request, and then we call the verify function to make sure that it matches what we have in our .env file. If it matches, then we proceed, and if it's this branch here, if it's the block actions, if the payload type is block actions and the action ID is the open review modal. So if we have a block action to carry out and it's the open review modal, then we're going to call the open modal function. We're going to take all that review context, so the Marketo email, Marketo ID, email, first name, last name, company. We're going to send all of that to the build review modal function, and it's going to return, so that's this function here. It takes all that review context, and then it's going to formulate this JSON body. So we're going to get that JSON body, and then we're just going to return that to Slack. And then in the other case, when we want to go down the handle submission branch, if the payload type is view submission, then that means we've received information from the modal. And then we parse out the sales, we parse out, we get the values that were in the modal, and then we take the sales owner ID, so we reference the sales owner block ID and the action ID. So again, this is referencing these variables up here. So we know where the sales owner value will be stored because we've configured it up here. So if we reference these in the values dictionary, it will give us the information we're looking for. So back down here. So in values, we're going to reference these places where we know the sales owner information is stored, and we're going to get the selected user. So this is the Slack user ID, and then to get the email, we're going to call this function. And then to formulate our Marketo payload or our Marketo dictionary, we take the Marketo ID from the review context, and then we're going to get the status. So similar to before, these are our variables from up above. So we know if we reference these, we'll know where to find the status and status reason values within the dictionary. So we get the status and status reason values. So we get the selected option. So we get all of these basically. We parse them out. This is our Marketo dictionary. And then we send this in the update lead function. And then this is the response from Marketo to let us know if it was successful or not. And then the last part of this is we're going to try and add a reaction to a message in Slack. So the reason we've got to try and accept here is if you action a Slack message more than once. So the first time you action a Slack message, it will put a tick. But then if you go back and you want to change it and hit the review button again and hit submit again, if you didn't have the try and accept here, the second time you try and add a reaction, that would cause an error because there's already a reaction. So that's why we have the try and accept here, in the case that if you want to hit the review button and have multiple submissions, if you want to do it 2 or 3 times in case you make mistakes and you need to go back and modify the lead, then this try and accept will make sure the code doesn't fail because we've already got a reaction on the message. And that's everything. So that's me explaining the code. That did take a little bit of time, so sorry for that. And you can always obviously skip that if you want to, or fast forward to the testing point, which I'm just going to go through here. Because if you all have AI agents helping you write your code and understand code, then you don't need to obviously understand this as well. But I always think a high level understanding is always useful, so you know what different pieces of the code are doing. So now we get to the part about running this. So to get this working, I've already done some of the setup here. When you download this from GitHub, you need to create your virtual environment first, which is this command. You go Python 3 -m, and then it's venv. You then activate that virtual environment with this line. And then the final part is you install the libraries that are specified in requirements.txt. And in PyCharm, once you've created your virtual environment, you can then reference it by clicking down here. And if you go add interpreter, add local interpreter, that's how you'll be able to select the local virtual environment. So that's the setup you need to do to get this working. And as I mentioned before, if you're not comfortable with doing terminal commands and importing code from GitHub, setting up your virtual environment and testing and debugging Python code, then I recommend the Python course to you guys. So once we have this all set up, the next part of this is in one terminal. So let me close this one and clear it. Where's the option to clear? Okay, so I can't clear it. In one terminal, we're going to be running our Slack interactions listener.py. Okay, so this is running on port 8080. And then this is running locally on our laptop. However, we need Slack to be able to access this Python script, but currently they're disconnected. Slack has no way to see this Python script that's running on our laptop. So what we need to do is we need to use ngrok as a forwarding mechanism. So I've got a diagram for that here. So ngrok acts as a middleman to forward information from Slack to our listener server and vice versa. It basically exposes the script running locally on our laptop to the public internet so that Slack can see it. So we have this running now. It's running on port 8080. So the next part is the command we're going to use. So I'll just Control C this one. Is ngrok http and then the port number, which is 8080. We can see that here, 8080. And then this is the forwarding URL. So this is the one that's exposed on the internet. And whenever an entity tries to query this endpoint or send information to it, it then forwards that to this local port on my laptop or on your laptop if you're running this. So we need to copy this forwarding URL, and then we need to go to Slack, and then we go to interactivity and shortcuts. We're going to enable interactivity, and then the request URL that we put in here, it's going to be the ngrok forwarding URL, or later on the Replit URL, and then we need to append it with this endpoint. So this Slack interactions endpoint, because this is where we'll either create the modal or we'll handle the submission from the modal. So we're going to put that in here, Slack interactions, and then we're going to hit save. And I've got these instructions for you further up in the blog post as well. So you can see how to do that here. It's pretty straightforward. So now that we have, now that we have our Slack interactions set up, now that we have our interactivity in Slack Now that we have our interactivity in our Slack app configured, we can now test it. So the only thing is I've got different API credentials in here for the live demo, so I'll need to put those in my .env file, because before I've currently got all the Marketo credentials, like the Marketo Slack app credentials in my .env file here. So I'll pause the camera, swap in the new Slack app credentials, and then we can do some testing. Okay, so I've swapped in the credentials for this new live demo Slack app into my .env file. And now the next thing we need to do is to configure the webhook we need in order to be able to send to, let's do it to the random channel actually. So we're going to go to incoming webhooks, activate incoming webhooks, and this is all because we want to be able to send it from a marketing automation platform. So let's add a new webhook. We want to send it to the random channel, allow. Okay, and it's this URL which we're going to use in our Marketo app. So if we go here, we're going to create a new webhook. Let's just call it Slack. Let's just call it live demo. Live demo. This is the URL, and then the payload. Again, you can take this payload from here, the Marketo webhook payload.json. The only thing is you'll need to swap in these tokens, like the number of employees, the industry. These are standard, like the job title and email address are standard, but the company, industry, and the number of employees, you'll need to swap in your Marketo tokens for these. So you can copy and paste this into your Marketo or HubSpot webhook interface, and then insert the tokens that you would use in your Marketo or HubSpot instance. And in this case, I'm just going to copy it directly from here, the one I set up earlier, because I already have all the Marketo tokens pre-configured. So let's go to live demo. Whoops, and paste this in. Okay, and then if we scroll it up here, we can see that I've got all the Marketo tokens in lead first name, lead last name. Whereas if we look at the template here at the top, oh, it already has a lot of them. Yeah, so these are standard Marketo tokens, so that's why I've pre-configured them for you. The only ones you'll need to replace are these non-standard Marketo tokens. Or of course, if you're using HubSpot or Salesforce, you'll need to pull in different variable values here altogether. So let me go back. So the payload here should be good. I'm going to go save. And then the only thing I need to update now is if I go to my marketing activities and I look for that send webhook requestable, I just need to call the live demo one now instead. Okay, so now we're ready to test. If I go back here and I go request campaign, and then it's going to be, sorry, no, it's still the send webhook function. Let's run now. So I'll pause the video while that's waiting. Okay, that was successful. So if we go back to Slack, we can now see that the new message was sent from the live demo app, and yeah, it works the exact same as before. Another way we could have sent this message is using our either the send Slack message function, so we can just run this here. That's odd. Send, oh no, it's trying to run the Slack interactivity. Let me go back to the terminal. I'm just going to do Python 3, and then I want to do the send Slack message. So this one is the one that uses the Slack API directly to send the message. Okay, so it's giving me an error here because the app hasn't been added to the channel. So when you're using, like we've just demoed here, when you use the webhook URL that I just showed you, so that's this one. When you use the webhook URL and you send to a URL, that's fine. but when you use the Slack API, you need to add the app as a member to the channel. So let's add an app, and we're going to add live demo. So let's add live demo to the channel. So now it's been added to the channel. So if we rerun this, the send slack message.py, it's still saying it's not. Oh, that's because we're trying to send to the wins channel here. Let's send to random, hit save. Bingo. Okay. So now this is the one that was sent from the send slack message.py. And then this is the one that replicates sending it from a webhook from either Marketo, HubSpot, Salesforce, whatever. But this one sends to the Slack webhook URL. So it's a different mechanism. But just to show you this also works, we can go, go Python 3 and then send, it's going to be Marketo webhook payload. Oh, and that sent it to the wins channel because that's what I had pre-configured. And in this case, it's sending it as the Marketo app. What did this one send it as? So this sent it as the new MQL demo. Oh, and the reason, it's because this Slack webhook URL that I currently have in my .env file, it's the URL associated with the Marketo profile. So if you give me a second, if I need to do that. So if I take this and I update it, I'll just show you here where I will be updating it. So I need to update this in my .env file because it's currently pointing to the Marketo app when it should be pointing to the live demo app. So give me a second. Okay, I made that change. So if I go to send Marketo webhook payload and if I change the, oh yeah. So now the Slack webhook URL, if I run this again, since I updated the Slack webhook URL to be the live demo app, and this URL here maps to the random channel, it will now send correctly to the random channel from the live demo app. And then let's do the more fun part of actually testing out submitting the interactivity. So last time we said SSL, let's say disqualified this time, bad use case. And then the sales owner will be, let's choose my brother Warren and go submit. And now we can see that the check mark emoji was added. And if we go back to Marketo and we refresh this, we can now see it was marked as disqualified. My brother's email address is now in the owner email address field, and the reason was updated to bad use case. So then the final thing, now that we've tested it out and we know it's working because we've run the listener, the Slack interactions listener.py on our laptop, the next part about this is hosting it somewhere like Replit or Lovable so that Slack can always access this server. The reason you don't want to keep running it on your local laptop is because if your local laptop dies or gets disconnected from the internet, then all your Slack interactions will stop working. So that's why you need to host it on a platform like Replit. And Replit makes it super easy. So all you need to do is go import code or design, import from GitHub, and then put in the GitHub URL. So if we go here, code, it's this URL that we're going to put in. And then we're going to go import from GitHub. And then immediately the Slack AI agent starts initializing the repository. It will look at all the required libraries. It will install them for you. And then once it's finished, all you'll need to do is enter your secrets, like your Marketo API secrets and your Slack secrets, into Replit, and then you can hit deploy and it's ready to go. So I'll wait for this to complete and then I'll show you how the rest of it works. So we can see that the agent has done its work to install all the necessary dependencies, and now it's correctly pointing to the fact that we need all of these values in our secrets in Replit. And the way I recommend doing this, actually, the quickest way, instead of typing them out one by one here, you can go secrets, and then I recommend going to more, and then edit as .env, and then all you have to do is go to the .env file that you have on your laptop. I'm not going to show you mine now because it contains actual API keys, but go to the .env file you have on your laptop that you've tested out and you've got all your API keys in there, and then just paste that in here. It makes it really easy. So then you don't need to fill out the fields one by one. You can just copy and paste them in. And obviously this won't work at the moment because these are all dummy values. So I'm going to pause the video and put my actual secrets in here. Okay, I have all my real secrets in here now, so I'm ready to publish this app. Okay. It's saying it can't find the run command, so I'm going to work with the AI agent to make sure that the run command is set. So I can show you what I'm doing, but trying to publish and run command is not set. I have set up the secrets. So I'll let that work away, and then I'll pause the video or unpause the video once this is fixed. So the agent fixed the issue with the run command not being set, and at the moment it's in the process of deploying. So what I'm going to do so long is I'm going to copy this URL, because this is the new URL we're going to have to give to our interactivity and shortcuts. So we'll keep the same endpoint, that doesn't change, but instead of going to the ngrok forwarding URL, we're going to go to this Replit URL now instead. So we've now, if we go back to the diagram, we now no longer need ngrok because our listener server hosted on Replit is already exposed to the public internet. So we're now back to this setup. Okay, and if we go back to Replit, so we have this set up. All we have to do now is wait for this to deploy, and then we can test out one of our modals again to make sure that everything's working fine now that we have our Python script hosted on Replit. Okay, so the app was published successfully, and this is the URL that we just pasted in here already, so we don't need to make any changes. All we need to do now is go to Slack and test out one of our modals. So if I go here, let's set it back to SAL, great use case, and volume. Let's set my Uncle Theo as the owner. And we got the emoji added right away, which shows me that the Replit server is working as we expect. But just to doubly confirm, if we go to the activity log in Marketo, we can see it was now changed to SAL. My Uncle Theo's address is now the owner. And then we can see that the reason was updated to great use case and volume. So that's the final part of this blog post. We now have our Slack interactivity ready to go because this server will always be on. It'll never go to sleep, so it'll always be ready to handle any interactions that we get from Slack. So you can now roll this out to your sales team. And that's all I had to show you in today's blog post. If you're interested in seeing how you can add AI intelligence to your workflows, then you can check out the AI for RevOps crash course, which will teach you valuable skills like MCP, fine-tuning, RAG, the batch API, and how to build multi-agent workflows. Since you're interested in APIs in Python already, I'm guessing this will be a good fit for you guys. So if you like this video, then please give it a thumbs up and a like. It took me a lot of time to get the GitHub template ready for you guys, testing out all the code, but also writing the blog. And now this video is about an hour long as well. So I appreciate any positive sentiments you can send my way, and leave me some comments to let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, and if you have any questions. Thank you.